iRacing's camera tool is wildly powerful. You can create and place cameras anywhere on track and anywhere on the cars. But with this power comes a pretty steep learning curve, and because of some silly and unhelpful UX choices, confusing and inconsistent terminology, UI elements that don't even often change anything or seem to change anything, bugs that have been persistent for years, and all this together makes it a really intimidating tool to really utilize. Yes, there are hover over tooltips and iRacing provided instructions, which I'll link in the description of the video below, but it's a lot to read, it's confusing, and there are even some inaccuracies. Quick example, this is their online instructions pretty early into the document. Let me zoom in a little bit here. You get a sentence like this. There can only be one car camera in each on-car group. You cannot add more car cameras, now that's car cameras is capitalized, that what are already there only adjust existing ones. Okay. And then the bullet point before this says, changes made to the cockpit camera are applied to every car in sim. And I don't even think that's true. I couldn't really recreate this, so I don't know. My name is Landon Lechner, and yes, despite its difficulty to really understand and harness, I am a big fan of iRacing and its robust camera system. I've been sim racing since Gran Turismo 1, my beloved sim racing gateway drug, and I've been a lead admin for GRL, Global Racing League, one of iRacing's largest leagues, also linked below, for over 2 years now. In order for our drivers to enjoy the best possible recaps together after our Thursday night peak-up races, through mostly trial and error, I've learned how to use the camera tool to the point where other drivers wanted to learn from me. So here we are. The goal is by the end of this, that you really understand it all completely and fundamentally as well as I do. I'll walk you through everything I know. I will definitely be bringing up some issues as we go along. With this understanding, you'll also see why creating sim-wide cameras for all your cars and tracks is unfortunately a massive hassle, which is why I also created a large set of custom cameras featuring over 60 cars and 75 tracks, including every single one of their layouts available for purchase at the link in the description below. I think the price is pretty reasonable for the months of work I put in, and I do intend to use a significant portion of any profits to buy more requested cars and tracks to continue adding new content as time goes on. Enough of that for now. I've broken this into chapters, which are also divided up on the video's timeline. This is going to be a deep dive, so buckle in. The first thing to understand is the difference between groups and cameras. These right here are groups. I know it says, if we collapse this, camera, but they're actually something called groups. Think of groups as containers that feature one or more camera shots. So already this probably seems weird, but let me show you what I mean. We'll start on the group edit tab because this tab determines what camera or cameras will be viewed in each group. Notice that everybody's favorite go-to group, the chase group, contains one camera, and it's called Cam Chase. Chase is the group, and the camera contained within that group is the Cam Chase camera. We know this group contains this camera because Cam Chase is here under the on the left side, under the heading in group. All these are available cameras, but they are not in the chase group. The group edit tab also lets you move cameras to and from groups with these corresponding arrows next to each camera, but there are limitations to these functions. More on that later on. Let's look at a couple other groups. If we select the cockpit group, you'll notice that this contains one camera called Cam Cockpit. If we go to Gearbox, this contains one camera called Cam Gearbox. If we go to Chopper, Cam Chopper. But if we look at some other groups, like any of the TV cameras, TV1, TV2, TV static, they contain several cameras, a lot of cameras actually. The main point here is to view a camera, it needs to be in a group. And that's actually what all of these are. They are not cameras, they're groups. So rewire your brain ball. When you're selecting different options here, you're selecting different groups, not different cameras. The relationship between groups and cameras is significant and crucial to understand if you want the rest of the video to make sense. Summary. These are groups that display one or more cameras, and cameras are designed to be put into groups in order to view and recall them. Groups allow you to switch between specifically selected cameras. This is really useful because once these selected cameras are inside a group, they can be switched, 1, with button mappings on your hardware, 2, at random every 10 seconds, 3, when the car in focus drives through certain points on track that you can manually specify, or 4, any combination of those first 3. More about switching between cameras in groups and its quirks and limitations as we go on. Hopefully the 3 tabs here on top, the camera edit, the group edit, and the config tab, make a little bit more sense now. The group tab displays and allows you to choose what cameras are inside what group. The camera tab is how you edit specific cameras that appear in groups, and the config tab, which we haven't discussed yet, that's for overall camera tool settings and button mappings. Summary, groups exist to allow for selective camera switching. Switching can be done manually or automatically. More on each of those methods later on. Next up, I think a lot of users are understandably worried about permanently messing something up due to the tool's complexity. So I'm going to be super reckless here, and I'm going to open the config tab, and I'm going to make sure this use temporary edits toggle is off. This is a pretty important toggle. Now that the use temporary edits toggle is disabled, any changes I make to a camera will persist during the session. Meaning you'll see after going back to the camera edit tab and messing with some of the settings, if I select a different camera and then go back to chase, because use temporary edits was off, all those changes are now persisting. Had the toggle been enabled, everything would have gone back to how it was before I made those changes when I reselected the camera. Next, I'm going to delete the far chase group. I'm going to delete TV static group, the TV3 group, TV2, TV1. And you'll see all those groups are missing now here, and that the camera, the chase camera, is still screwed up. So everything is all messed up now. To go back to the way things were, I'm going to simply go load track and then load its default. And look at that. The chase camera is back to normal, and TV 1, 2, and 3 are back as well. You can also exit and re-enter the session, and everything again will go back to normal. The reason everything goes back to its default state in both cases is because I didn't save anything. I didn't create a new file by first hitting save track or save car. So don't be afraid to mess with stuff. You can't override those default files. Summary. Unless you actively save your edits using the save track or save car options, even if you turn off use temporary edits, changes will only persist during your current session. The same goes for any other group or camera adjustments you make, including deleting groups altogether. You can always go back to the default groups by loading the default car and track files, which cannot be changed or edited by users. I think that's enough initial theory to get us started. So let's go ahead and do something with all that newfound knowledge, and let's create a custom group with a custom camera with a unique angle in it. This is going to be a top-down kind of view, which is something that I use for stewarding purposes quite often. So here's what my process is. I'm going to start by hitting pause in case the car in focus experiences any connection issues. We don't want this car disappearing from the sim while we're making this camera. Then I'm going to select a group that's kind of similar to what we're going for. In this case, I'm going to go to the chase group, open the camera tool, and then ensure on the config tab that use temporary edits is off. Otherwise, it will not remember any edits that we make. Next, I'm going to go to the group tab and create a new group using this plus button, and I'll rename it top. And then hit enter, and you'll see below the chase group, it created a new group called top there. At this point, the camera inside of our new group was the same one as our last active camera, which was the chase group's camera. We don't want to edit that camera. We want the chase group to remain what it was. So we're going to go to camera edit, and we're going to insert a new camera. And I'm also going to name that top. Now I'm going to go back to the group edit and move the cam chase camera back over to the available side so that only the top camera is in the top group. Go back to camera edit. And I'm going to make some adjustments more on what these controls do specifically later on. That looks pretty good. If we're happy with that, I'm just going to hit save track. I'm going to rename it something like top_track. And then I'm going to hit save. And that's the process. Now, if we exit the session and come back in, your new group with your new camera inside will automatically load up with all the other default groups and cameras in this list. Pretty easy, right? Yes, but no. Here's the first major issue. So we just created a new group and camera, but they are only usable for this one track. Not just for this one track, but for this one particular layout of this one particular track. Meaning if you want this view for all your content, you have to repeat those same steps for every layout of every track you want this view for. Isn't that crazy? When trying to come up with a solution for this, one of the things I did was I tried setting up a group on one track layout like we just did. Then I copied and pasted the file to all the other tracks and layouts using Windows file system. Unfortunately, that didn't work. These track files also save and recall the settings for the default cameras like TV1 and TV2, TV3, scenic, pit lane, static cameras, etc. So all those groups were in the wrong places from track to track. So it really made those default groups pointless. So that wasn't a good solution. At this point, you may be understanding why I decided to create a car and track pack along with this video, so you don't have to do all that work yourself. Summary. To create custom groups and cameras, first disable use temporary edits, then create a new group, then a new camera, customize the camera, remove the old camera, then save it using the save track option. This approach, however, only saves your new group and camera to one layout of one track, which is a massive limitation. The camera tool features two distinct group types. One group type I call locked and the other I call editable, hopefully for obvious reasons. This is not outlined anywhere in the documentation as far as I can tell, but it's pretty significant and probably a considerable source of confusion. The first 9 groups here are all locked groups. Every other group below them belongs to the editable group type, including any new groups that a user creates. I made a few charts for this video to help keep this stuff straight. The link is also in the description below. There's also some other charts that I will be referring to in this video in that link, as well as an up-to-date list of all the cars and tracks that are currently available in the track pack I created. So let's go back to the groups type chart. Let's talk about the locked group type first. The first 9 groups, nose, gearbox, roll bar, gyro, all 4 of the suspension groups, and the cockpit group all belong to the lock type, and they cannot be created, renamed, reordered, or deleted even in your own save files. We'll discuss camera types next, but just know for now that users cannot edit the list of cameras of any locked groups. So these 9 cameras, first 9 cameras up to scenic, are all pretty restrictive. In other words, the locked groups can only contain the camera type that they already have. We'll talk about camera types more in detail in the next section, but just know that the first 9 groups are permanently locked to the specific camera they already contain. And because we're unable to delete any of these existing groups, any custom group list we want to create will always have these top 9 groups with these exact same names featuring only their one current camera, even if we never use them, which is a huge bummer. The editable group type down below are all the rest of the groups from scenic on down. These groups can be renamed, reordered, deleted, or even created, then saved using the save track option in the camera tool right here. And this is regardless of which car you are driving. They can contain any camera type, so you can use any of the 6 camera types that exist. And they can contain, of course, they can contain multiple cameras, because that's how we got those TV groups we looked at earlier. To make things even more confusing, while all group lists for all layouts and tracks do have the same locked groups, the first 9 groups, not all tracks have the same editable groups. Some tracks contain a group called static. Some have one called mixed and static, as we see here at Okayama. Some has one called spotter. There's some that have a unique combination of them, and a lot of tracks don't even have any of these 3. Many of the tracks even have the groups in a different order, which can be really annoying and make you think you're going a bit crazy. In my track pack, I did reorder all the groups, so at least all the groups that do exist are always in the same order. Before we move on, let's go over this top row where the name is on the group edit tab. I don't believe any of these functions work for locked groups, but they are all available for any editable group. Why they aren't grayed out here, I don't know. So like if I tried to rename this nose 2, you can see it went nose 2 and then, but it didn't change here like it did with the editable groups. If I go back to gearbox and then go back to nose, it didn't register that change. So as I mentioned, you can't change the names of the on-car groups here. So this should be grayed out. These up and down arrows are used to move groups up and down the group list. But as you hit those arrows, you can't really tell how far you've moved because the UI with the group list collapses. So you really can't tell where you are. It's kind of, you have to just kind of count, which is annoying. Ideally, the list should pop up and reflect the ordering of groups as you're clicking the arrows, showing the active group moving up or down in the list. Then maybe the list could time out and collapse after 3 seconds or so. Personally, that's how I would like it to behave. You click this plus button to add a new group under the current one, as we've seen before, and keep in mind whatever camera was active will be carried over to the newly created group. The copy and paste buttons allow you to copy and paste the group and its camera list to another group, and the delete button deletes the group entirely. Summary: the system features 2 distinct group types. The top 9 groups are all unmodifiable locked groups restricted to specific cameras and camera types, and all other groups are customizable editable groups that users can freely configure and save per track. Editable groups can feature any camera type, which is our next topic of discussion. While the 9 top locked groups remain identical across all tracks, the inconsistent naming and ordering of the editable groups across different tracks may cause user confusion. It's about to get more complex, believe it or not, so I hope you're with me so far. If not, it might be a good idea to watch the previous sections a few more times before moving on. There are 3 distinct camera types, each with its own unique capabilities and limitations. To help us visualize and navigate the differences in capabilities of each camera, I'll be referring to this chart as we go. It's on that same dock. The type of camera you're viewing is determined by this drop down here in the camera edit tab, position type. The 3 types of cameras are the on-car camera type, the driver camera type, and the variable camera type, which includes fixed, blimp, chopper, and chase position types, which I'm calling the variable type. The reason I'm calling them variable type is because they all have the same capabilities, And because you can actually switch between them using this dropdown. This whole row of dropdowns makes things much more confusing than it should. Notice that you can't change the position type for on-car or driver cameras. And while you can't change their type, you can edit and save many other settings here in the Camera Edit tab for existing on-car and driver cams, which is exactly how I made my car pack. But if I go to the chase cam, I can actually select the fixed option, the blimp option, the chase option, or the chopper option. So why is this even a dropdown for the on-car and driver position types? Similarly, you can't change the aim type for either the driver or on-car cameras. So why show this dropdown also, which again makes it seem like you can select other options, right? There should only be dropdowns if you can actually select something different. The first two camera types, on-car and driver, are locked to the static aim type. As we saw, that's the only one you can select. Static cameras can point in any direction, and they enable the yaw, pitch, and roll controls, also known as the rotation row. I like to think of these as like the airplane controls. The at-car aim type restricts the camera aim to the center of whatever driver you have selected. The at-group does the same thing, but it adds some side-to-side deviation in there. The view type dropdown places a blocky gray camera in the shot so you can visualize where the camera is on track. The camera is not visible when set to live. I very rarely use that feature. I don't expect you will either. Next, you cannot create additional on-car cameras or driver cameras or edit the existing names of either one. I totally understand this limitation for the driver camera, since this is the camera you see when you're actually driving. But why can't we edit or create more on-car cameras? I wish we could, just like I wish we could rename, reorder, or even delete the first 8 groups. I'm sure there's a reason, but it's frustrating for camera tool power users. You're able to add depth of field effects on all cameras except for the driver camera. This allows cool views like having the dashboard blurred out, or the scenery in the distance, even in live replays. I use this effect quite a bit in my camera and track packs. The depth of field effects are controlled within the lens and exposure section right here, using different combinations of these 3 controls: field of view, the focus depth, and the aperture. It's just like how a real camera works, so the lower the f-stop, the blurrier things will be that are not in focus, which is controlled by this focus depth slider. You do have to enable some features in the post-processing section of the graphics tab in the settings page in order to see the depth of field and other blur effects here. So let's show you where that is. If you go to your settings, graphics, post-processing effects, depth of field effect right here. We'll cover all the other camera settings in the section coming up next. Lastly, while you can add additional on-car driver cams, you can edit some of their camera settings of these types, and then you save those changes using the Save Car button. So edits to these cameras are saved with the Save Car button here. When it comes to the variable camera types, on the other hand, newer existing cameras and their edits and their settings, they will be saved using the Save Track button. This means that any changes made and saved to the on-car and driver camera types will carry over to every track and every track layout, but only for the specific car. Conversely, any changes made and saved to the variable type cameras will apply to every car, but only for this specific track layout. This is pretty confusing, so let me say that again in a different way. Any edits you make to the on-car or driver camera types will be saved with the car file using Save Car, and any creations or edits made to the fixed, blimp, chopper, and chase camera types will be saved in a track file using the Save Track button. So let's review and bring all this together. The Save Car button saves any edits made to the on-car and driver cameras, which of course is reflected in any groups that contain them. And Save Track has 2 functions. One, it saves any edits made to the fixed, blimp, chopper, and chase cameras, or the variable type as I call them. And 2, it saves any changes made to the editable group types, which we talked about in the last section, which includes any newly created groups, renamed groups, group ordering, and what cameras each editable group contains. Summary. There are 3 camera types: on-car, driver, and the variable camera types: fixed, blimp, chopper, and chase. On-car and driver cameras are largely locked down. You can't change their position type, aim type, create new ones, or rename them, making several drop-down menus appear more flexible than they actually are. Variable cameras are much more flexible, allowing you to switch between position types and use all 3 aim modes: static, at car, and at group. Depth of field effects are available on every camera except the driver camera, using the lens settings that mimic real-world cameras, but will only work if the depth of field effect is enabled in the general settings. Finally, saving changes depends on the camera type. Save car stores edits to the on-car and driver cameras, while save track stores all variable camera edits as well as changes to the editable camera groups, such as creating, renaming, reordering groups, and assigning cameras to them. At this point, hopefully you've already learned some new and useful things. If you're liking the video so far and want to help others find it, give it a like and help sway their algorithm. If you want to thank me, leave a comment below. Let me know what was the most helpful part for you, and that also helps the video's visibility. Or if you want to go a step further, pick up my camera packs in the links below. Hopefully this video also empowers you to build on what I've already made and create some amazing groups and cameras yourself. Now let's go through the rest of the camera settings. Here's where you rename the cameras if they are the variable camera type. These next 3 buttons I don't like. Counterintuitively, in my opinion, they should allow you to switch between the cameras in the current group, or be grayed out and disabled if there is only one camera in the group, but that's not what they do. They switch between the groups similar to the up and down arrows on the group edit tab. Next are the add new, copy, paste, and delete buttons, which allow those functions as long as the camera is, you guessed it, only a variable type camera. The placement and aim controls we haven't talked about yet are the X, Y, and Z controls. They are enabled for every camera. X moves the camera itself forwards and backwards. Y moves it left and right. And then Z moves it up and down. Several number boxes like these need some UX TLC because they don't behave as you'd expect in some cases. The whole field should become highlighted if I double click it. And if I do highlight the field and I want to put in a negative number, I have to hit delete instead of just typing the negative sign. These could be improved. It's a little annoying trying to type numbers in when they don't behave like you'd expect a number box to behave. Under the lens and exposure section, the first slider is for the field of view, and it has 2 modes, degrees and percentages. Degrees widens or narrows FOV in, you guessed it, in degrees, and in percentage roughly specifies how much space the focus driver should take up on the screen. If you can't get far or close enough using the percentage slider in this mode, try zooming in or out more with the X position number back up at the top X position here. Focus depth and aperture we talked about in the last section, but remember they work in tandem with each other, and they are both also directly affected by the FOV slider. The exposure slider is basically the brightness, and the motion blur slider is important for taking screenshots and will determine how much blur is happening when the replay or live view is paused. This is another feature that will only work once you enable the related post-processing graphic feature in the general settings, and that is in graphics, post-processing, motion blur, broadcast motion blur, camera motion blur. I always get the next 2 sections, properties and advanced, mixed up. Their section titles seem really arbitrary. These 2 toggles allow for roll and pitch movement, which is especially noticeable for cameras that are set up inside a cockpit. They're a bit confusing because what you're actually doing is toggling whether or not to enable gyro stabilization to the roll or pitch movement of the camera. So if you want to see roll or pitch movement, you actually need to disable them. What you do if you enable them is you're essentially turning the gyro on for each one of those respective toggles. The location row has 2 toggles, and I cannot for the life of me figure out what the first one is for. Listen to this description. Adjust the sorting order of the transparent objects if the track fences appear incorrectly behind the car's windshield. Enabling this option may correct the issue. Cool. The in-cockpit toggle does actually make sense to me, but I'll expect you'll rarely use this. Enabling this turns up the detail inside the cockpit while removing unnecessary pieces of the exterior car model to decrease system demand. It's only available with on-car camera types, and credit where credit's due, this control actually is grayed out and unclickable unless the camera type is set to on-car. And this last toggle, stabilization, simply dampens overall camera movement. So simple enough. Next, we have the advanced section. Lowering the clip distance allows objects closer to the camera to be rendered in shot, while increasing it moves the clipping plane out, causing objects further away to disappear. Clip distance can be used to do entertaining things like creating a cross-section of your car while you're driving or watching your suspension work. Shake makes the camera shake more or less when the virtual car experiences shaking, either by car vibrations and bumps or air turbulence caused from cars passing by the cameras at high speeds. Why shake isn't in the previous section with the rest kind of bumpiness features in the properties up above, I don't know. iRacing's online manual perfectly explains these next 2 vanish sliders here, vanish X and vanish Y. These offset the view a bit, either up or down or left and right. It is convenient to use if you want the car to appear a little lower on the display. Note that the shadows will not change when the vanish is added to the cameras, and that adding large amounts of vanish may cause issues in shadows being rendered. So let's look at what that looks like. Moves it up or down, and left or right. Next is the on-cam microphone settings here. Enabling the parabolic mic makes the mic sound more directional, so you'll hear less of the surrounding cars when it's enabled. Mic gain is just the output volume for this particular camera. Holding down the set to peak button sets the sound to a reasonable level relative to the loudest sound that occurred while the button was being held down. The next 2 sliders, cam chase bias and minimum mic distance, work in tandem together. The UI is weird though, as minimum mic distance, the slider only changes the sound when the top slider is set to max, which as far as I can tell is it just goes from 0 to 1. So why is this even a slider? The UI would make more sense if the cam chase bias here was a toggle and the minimum mic distance was grayed out and unclickable until the toggle was enabled, kind of like how it is up here for the focus depth. You can see this slider activate when the toggle is off. I feel like that's how the minimum mic distance should be. The function of the minimum mic distance slider, it sets the minimum distance for the sound for the in-car focus, but it's a pretty subtle change and neither control is very clearly named in my opinion. Then we've got the distortion drop down, which is like putting a crunchy guitar pedal on the sound. This makes it sound better and more realistic in my opinion, but it doesn't work for the driver cam, which is the main camera I want it on. By the way, I'm anxiously waiting for the impending sound design overhaul. So a lot of the sound settings here, actually, they might change when that eventually rolls out. No joke, as a huge lover of high quality audio, this has been the #1 thing I have wanted update-wise for iRacing since they announced they were working on it years ago. So fingers crossed for next season, right? Once the blimp position type is enabled, the blimp controls section will activate. The blimp moves in a consistent circle while the camera on the blimp follows the targeted driver. The X, Y, and Z position parameters up here, they actually set the center point of the circular path of the blimp relative to the track. Back down here, the blimp radius allows you to adjust how large the circle of the blimp's flight path is, And you can, alternatively, you could use the calculate button to let the sim estimate the proper sized radius of circle for you. Then you control the speed of the blimp's flight path with the velocity slider, and you can make the blimp go forward or backwards along that circular path. The last section is the shot range, and iRacing does a pretty good job of explaining this, but I'll add to it as we go. Inside a group, camera placements have the ability to be strung together to form a cohesive camera set for an entire lap at a track. This is done by first enabling the limited toggle, then setting up each camera in a group to follow their shot range. Each track on iRacing has a numerical value tied to how far along a car is to completing one lap. The shot range function uses this position number as a marker to determine when a camera should be active or left inactive. 0 is always the origin point of a lap or the start-finish line. The position number assigned to the very end of a track is different from track to track since they are all different lengths, but the ending positions are always pretty high numbers, usually in the thousands. As an example, a camera covering the entire front stretch might go from camera position 5700 to position number 200. Clicking set start or set end will use the target car's position on track to essentially mark the start or end of that particular camera's range. The iRacing group will generally stay on an active camera until it is inactive. So the best course of action when setting up a series of shots is to set the start point a few points early before the end point of the last camera so that there are no gaps when switching between shot range limited cameras. Slightly more complicated example, but this should make things a little bit more clear. To use 3 cameras on a lap, for example, camera A could be set to become active from 150 to 400 right here. Camera B could be set active from 395 to 650, and camera C could be set active from 645 to 155. And lastly, the set button creates a starting point. Then as you move the camera's position, the section below it shows the distance between them displayed in track point values. Summary. The Camera Edit tab allows you to edit the camera's settings. As I mentioned earlier, the reason for groups is so that we can switch between cameras more methodically, so let's talk about that in more detail. Hopefully this is obvious by now, but switching cameras can only be done in the editable groups here, not the locked groups, since they only can contain one camera, as you can see here. As a quick review, once multiple cameras are inside an editable group, they can be switched: 1, with button mappings on your hardware; 2, at random every 10 seconds; 3, when the car in focus drives through any certain points on tracks that you can manually specify with the shot range we just looked at; or for any combination of those previous 3 options. So let's do this. Let's create a new group. I'm going to call this switch group. Switch grow. That's fine. And I'm going to add a few more cameras to it. Now let's head over to the config tab to discuss button mappings as the first method. In order to move up and down in our camera list, we need to map the next and previous camera options, but joke's on you, that mapping is not in the camera tool. It's in the general settings, along with the option to move between groups. So if we go to settings, and I go to search, and joke is double on you because there's actually some inconsistent naming conventions in these settings, and here is the first one. So I'm going to type in camera to bring up the settings, and those are in replay. This section is what we want. To map the ability to move between groups, you need to map the next and previous camera options. And if you want to map the ability to move between cameras inside of a group, you need to map the next and previous sub-camera options. So now iRacing is referring to groups as cameras and cameras as sub-cameras for some reason. Nothing confusing about that. The general settings are also where you map 2 more important controls, the previous and next incident options for replays. These two controls have a really frustrating bug. If you move between incidents too quickly, which actually isn't very quickly at all, the functionality will break and you will be stuck on the same car. You'll need to exit and rejoin the session. It sucks having to do this during race recaps while everybody's waiting because you skipped through incidents too fast. Another issue with these particular controls, some corners on some tracks like turn 6 at Long Beach, I believe, and 11 and 12 at the international layout of the bend will trigger an incident anytime a car passes through them, incident or not, which again is super annoying when trying to review incidents during league race reviews. Anyway, back to moving between cameras using button mappings within a group. One of what I think is a pretty significant limitation of the cameras in a group is if you want to manually switch them, you can only order them here alphabetically from A to Z or from Z to A. Even creating specific naming conventions to get around this, like putting a 1 and then a 2, etc. in front of the name won't work, because if you want to put any on-car or driver camera in the group, remember you can't rename those camera types, so that's kind of lame. It would be really nice if you could just drag and drop them in any order, and maybe instead have a drop down for alphabetical ascending or descending order, then an XQ button to initiate that sorting method. Okay, on to the second method for switching cameras, which is to let the tool select a different car at random every 10 seconds, like what we've been looking at so far. When cameras with no shot range set are in an editable group like they are now, by default, iRacing will automatically switch to a different camera in the group at random every 10 seconds. The third method is by using the shot range selection to set the limits on the shot, as we discussed last in the previous section. Once a range is set, you'll notice that instead of the Q column of the camera always being set to 15, it will actually count down from 100 to 0, depending on how far the driver in focus is to the shot boundaries that were created. At 100, the driver just hit the start point, and at 0, the driver is beyond the end point. If the camera's text is white, that camera is subject to being selected based on where the target car is on track. If the camera's text is grayed out, the opposite is true for that camera. Cameras in a group with the limited shot range do work in tandem with the non-shot range cameras in the group. If one of those is selected, that shot will be active for 10 seconds. This means cameras without a shot range will always have white text, they will always stay active for 10 seconds, and they will always show a Q of 15. Note that the currently selected camera's text will always be yellow. Automatic switching can be defeated by disabling automatic shot selection. But don't close the camera tool. Otherwise, automatic shot selection will resume, even though if we open up the camera tool again, you'll see that it's still disabled. If you want to remain on the currently selected camera, you can minimize the tool here, but don't close it. The automatic shot selection is actually automatic camera selection. Why all of a sudden they are calling a camera a shot, I'm not entirely sure. My guess is because of the general terminology confusion. Everything is just a bit muddy. And I believe there is a bug with the automatic shot selection. So let me go back to this switch group, and then I'm going to add the cam cockpit. And we'll wait for the cam cockpit option to be selected. Let me make sure I've got shot enabled automatically. Okay, there we go. If you put the cam cockpit or the driver camera in a group, if that camera is selected, the group will no longer switch cameras. It will be stuck on that camera until you manually select a different one. It effectively disables automatic camera selection once it's selected. So don't put this camera in a group unless you only intend to switch cameras using button mapping. Summary. Once multiple cameras have been added to an editable group, there are 4 ways to switch between them. Using mapped hardware buttons, automatically at random every 10 seconds, based on user-defined shot ranges, or by combining those methods. Button mappings are configured in iRacing's general settings, where the mappings are named inconsistently with the camera tool. Also in the general settings, the previous/next incident controls can be mapped, but they break if you jump between incidents too quickly, requiring you to rejoin the session. In addition, some track corners incorrectly register incidents. A drawback regarding camera switching is that cameras can only be ordered alphabetically, making it impossible to create custom sequences where fixed name cameras, such as the cockpit view, are included. By default, cameras without limited shot ranges are randomly cycled every 10 seconds, while cameras with shot ranges only become active when the focused car enters their defined area. Automatic switching can be disabled by turning off automatic shot selection, but only while the camera tool remains open. Closing it re-enables the feature, but not the toggle itself. There also appears to be a bug where including the cockpit camera in a group causes automatic switching to stop once that camera is selected. We've already discussed the first two toggles on the config tab, so let's look at the inputs and acceleration section here. The input size slider controls how fast the camera moves when using a keyboard or controller to do things like zoom in and zoom out or adjust the X, Y, and Z parameters. Higher values are faster movements, lower are slower. Enabling the acceleration toggle means that holding a button or analog stick to control a parameter will continue to increase its speed the longer you hold the button. The turbo toggle below that makes any adjustments move 10 times faster. I love using a controller during race recaps. Mapping a USB controller greatly minimizes my mouse clicks, and you can create really dynamic action shots where the focal blur point changes, or a roof camera can spin around and watch another car as it passes by, or you can create sideways moving dolly shots as the entire field goes by. And as long as you enabled use temporary edits, all the settings you altered in that camera will go back to normal once you select that camera or that group again. By the way, before I got this cheap little Logitech F310 or something like that, I mapped my wheel to a lot of the button click replay functions. I essentially created another layer of mappings by holding down one of the paddle shifters as a shift key and then selecting a button at the same time. The existing keyboard shortcuts work, of course, also, but it's helpful to have the analog inputs on a controller for smooth panning and things like that. I try to buy used whenever I can, so I definitely recommend looking for a used controller or figuring out how to connect an Xbox controller that you may already have laying around the house before having to buy something new. As we covered earlier, you can map the ability to switch between groups, cameras, and incidents in the general settings section of the sim. I also map several buttons to perform camera tool specific operations, which are mapped on the config tab of the camera tool here. I map the X, Y, and Z controls, which all have different names here. The pitch and yaw controls, which have different names here. The FOV control, which has a different name here. And you can even map the ability to open up the camera tool itself. I also have the Turbo 10x speed mapped, so I have 2 speeds for all the analog controls. It doesn't seem like the turbo works for rotation controls though, like the yaw. Maybe another bug, since it seems like that option should be available. The yaw control happens way too slowly to catch all the action of driving by some chaos and watching it all from a roof cam, for example. I also have this very important auto shot toggle mapped, which I frequently use to stay on a static camera to see the whole field pass on a given corner of lap 1 instead of the camera switching as the focal car exits the shot range. Something I wish was different. I use a controller so often. Whenever a car spins out and is rolling backwards, or they go in reverse, all my controls get flipped and the camera view flips around to the opposite side of the car. Right becomes left, left becomes right. My muscle memory really struggles to move the cameras like I want. It's just super awkward all of a sudden. I'd love an option to toggle the default chase cam behavior, which is stated in the iRacing user manual as this. When the target car switches from a forward or neutral gear to a reverse gear, the chase camera will snap 180 degrees to the opposite direction, facing the XY position it previously sat. I totally understand why they made this choice with the chase camera, but I'd appreciate an option to prevent the chase cam from flipping around 180 degrees. Another adjacent feature I'd appreciate is a forward-facing chopper cam, since currently the chopper cam can only follow cars from behind and not in front. Another feature that I would love, and I don't think would be too much of a stretch with the flexibility of the new UI, would be a camera tool widget, so I could create like a custom panel with a few select options or controls of my choice. So I could always see whether use temporary edits and auto shot are enabled instead of having to open up the whole camera tool panel to see them because it's so big. Maybe also let users add a slider or two so I could also see the focal depth or the zoom level, and also maybe like an always visible view of the in-group camera list, or even an always present view of the group list itself. Summary: using a USB game controller with the iRacing camera system can improve replay viewing by reducing mouse input, while making it much easier to create dynamic camera movements such as tracking passing cars, orbiting roof cameras, and smooth dolly shots. In addition to mapping for switching between cameras and groups, it's worth mapping replay controls, camera movement, rotation, zoom, turbo mode for 10x adjustments. There are, however, a couple frustrations. There's no way to override controls that become flipped when a car goes in reverse or moves backwards, and turbo mode appears not to affect rotation controls. In addition to being able to map a huge variety of controls, there are also a few really useful keyboard shortcuts, keypad shortcuts specifically, that I frequently use that are kind of hidden shortcuts in a way. I say that because they show up looking like an afterthought way down at the bottom of the iRacing instructions in the keybind section, and I think they are incredibly useful for saving clicks. I've got another chart to help familiarize you with these commands, so let's take a look. There are single commands, and then there are combination commands. In order to switch to a specific car number, just hit asterisk, the car number, and then enter. In order to switch to a specific position on track, like the car in first or the car in second, hit the backslash, then the position number, then enter. You can also switch between the camera groups, go to specific camera groups. The number of each camera group is respective to what number it is here on the list. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Asterisk, asterisk, 9, enter. Then there's two combination commands. And what these do is combines a car or position number with a camera group number. So you can do something like asterisk 64, asterisk 9, enter, and it will go to the number 64 car with the number 9 camera group. You can do something similar with a position and group number. Backslash 1, asterisk 9, enter for the number 1 position car and the number 9 camera group. Summary: learn the keypad shortcuts shown here in this chart to save time and clicks during race replays. A few more quick things to discuss. iRacing does a good job of explaining mouse aim mode. There is a special navigation mode that allows you to use the mouse to aim and fly a camera around the track. You can enable it once the camera tool is up by hitting Ctrl-Z. Once activated, moving the mouse will aim the camera, and hitting the mouse buttons will move you forward and back. You can hit escape at any time to reset the camera back to its default location, or if you hit Ctrl-Z again, the camera tool will attempt to update the camera location and orientation if possible for the camera type selected. So I'll hit Ctrl-Z, and as you can see, even in the on-car mode, I can move my mouse around to look at different things happening, and I can hit escape to reset it. You can continue to use the keyboard to control the camera while in mouse aim mode. This can result in very complex motions without much effort from the operator. As you've seen, it works with on-car camera types, but the camera stays in one spot. If you use other camera types like fixed, you can fly around the track, which can be useful for line analysis, to follow cars around the track, though that can be tough since there's only one speed, or to quickly put a camera in a specific place on track. You may have noticed these two controls at the bottom of the VCR edit window, and maybe they're grayed out for you. In order to enable them, you need to go to your graphics tab, post-processing, and enable replay render modes. And once that's done, you can add a vignette, or you can do like black and white or red pop. And then that's just how the replay looks for you now. So there's some cool post-processing effects kind of built into the replay system now. I think is a relatively new addition. Lastly, in this section, a quick troubleshooting tip. If you ever get stuck on a car or view, first try switching cars. Go back and forth between cars. That doesn't work. Try closing the camera tool and opening it back up. If neither one of those work, you may need to hit the double fast forward button here, or the in/live button. Beware that you will lose your place in your replay if you weren't live already. That's a second to last resort, but the ultimate last resort is to exit the session and come back in, which of course isn't ideal, but sometimes it does get stuck and you have to do that. Summary: mouse aim mode, Control Z, lets you fly around and aim the camera with a mouse while still using the keyboard for smooth dynamic shots. To spice up replays, you can also add replay effects in the graphics settings for additional visual effects like vignette and color filters. As a general troubleshooting tip, if the camera ever gets stuck or becomes unresponsive, try switching cars, reopening the camera tool, or if necessary, jumping to live, or as a last resort, rejoining the session. Before I let you go, I wanted to briefly show off my camera and track packs, since hopefully now you can see why having somebody else create a robust set of them for you is pretty great. As I mentioned earlier, an up-to-date list of included cars and tracks is available at the link in the description below, and also on my Ko-Fi page where you can get the packs. There are two packs, the car pack and the track pack, which at the time of recording this, the car pack features over 60 cars currently, and the track pack contains 75 tracks, including every single one of their alternate layouts. The track pack really works best alongside the car pack, so keep that in mind if you're considering just purchasing the track pack. The car cameras for each car in the pack features 8 custom on-car cameras, most of which utilize the depth of field effects to really make them look unique. The track pack features 3 new groups that you will find at the bottom of this list: a drone view, a top-down view, which I use all the time for stewarding, and a car mixed group, which features 2 drone cameras and a selection of the on-car cameras. A great one to choose after a race. Just let the auto shot selection do its thing and you'll see a new view every 10 seconds. If you do decide to buy the packs, before pasting the packs into your iRacing camera folder, I recommend creating a backup or even moving your camera files somewhere else in case you created cameras for cars and tracks that you would later like to merge with mine, or even just in case there are any issues. These folders are very small storage-wise, which is great. Once that's done, download the packs and paste them in either the iRacing main folder if you bought both the car and the track pack, or into the camera folder inside the iRacing folder if you bought either the car or track pack individually. And that should be it. You may have to load the file once you're in the sim if they don't automatically load. That's as easy as going to the camera tool, clicking on load car, clicking on load track, and then loading the files that are available to you. Note that when loading a car file, always load a track file afterwards, even if it's just the default file. Otherwise, the editable groups will show up at the top of the group list in your current session, rather than the bottom like usual. If you are loading the track file, you only need to load that. I had to open several hundred sessions to build all these cameras, so it's highly likely I made a mistake somewhere. If you do find one or several, send me an email and I'll address it as soon as I can. As you might imagine, creating this video was a lot. I wrote a script, I tried to plan it and present it in the way that made the most sense, at least to me. Hopefully it made sense to you as well. It's a very complicated tool, as you found out. I probably missed some things. I probably got things wrong. In fact, I would be surprised if I didn't. So let me know in the comments. I'm also curious what parts of this you found to be the most helpful, or the things that you think you'll use the most, or that were the most surprising. Appreciate you watching. Happy sim racing.